Mary McCarthy was a political activist and author who wrote in favour of the Viet Cong. In her incredibly long piece, Report from Vietnam, she aims to inform readers about the realities of the war and persuade readers against the war. Her piece essentially says that war is bad, but it's being carried out by those who believe they're doing good. She starts by talking about her entrance into Thailand, says there's no attempt by the Americans to conceal their military operations. There's a massive American presence in both Thailand and Vietnam, with Saigon, a Vietnamese city, feeling like a downtrodden American city. There's Americans and military tanks everywhere, and the buildings that they've been building are of a poor quality, so essentially temporary solutions to long-term problems. Vietnam feels very Americanized. Shops are selling American goods. Even in the church, sermons are ran by Americans for Americans. There's very little Vietnamese culture, and the idea it's a sort of tacky city. Vietnamese war orphans aren't properly cared for, there's pollution, and there's lots of illegal activities such as messing with money and child prostitution. The Americans respected some of the enemy soldiers, that's the Viet Cong. McCarthy comments that nobody's questioning the war and expresses a cynical attitude towards American soldiers. He comments that there's a lack of austerity and the war is to do with money and it seems pointless. The war is supposedly against communism to prevent the spread of communism and to save money, but this isn't actually happening in reality. She says that this isn't what was going to happen, this isn't what the war is really about. She says that there's sort of the idea of progress, but there's actually a chaotic reality, and figures that have been used to show the progress actually show false improvements. She says that there's corruption by nurses, and the attempts at schemes within sort of the Vietnam area are thwarted by the lack of education. There's some medical improvements, but insufficient resources and poor hospitals. Those that are trying to help are not doing enough. Soldiers are focused on the war rather than benefiting the population. There's some war-wounded children. There's not educating the Vietnamese on how to fight their own war. The aid being sent is used to help the American interest, promote the American interest rather than help the Vietnamese. Americans are creating chaos and unsettlement in trying to help, and they're doing half-doing jobs. So they're building a school, but they're not providing teachers. There's a sort of lack of communication between the Americans and the Vietnamese, and the Americans are sort of indoctrinating the Vietnamese, supposedly. No one knows what the war's for. The Americans are seen as aggressing Vietnam. Some soldiers are merely fighting for personal monetary gain, and there's a sort of lack of care by soldiers, although some Americans are supposedly doing their best to help. General malnutrition and poverty throughout Vietnam, and they're sort of introducing the Vietnamese to the American way of life, sort of selling Americanisms. There's short-term improvements, there's no long-term stability and welfare, and essentially she says the war is designed to make those fighting it look good. That is not a 1 minute summary. I'm so sorry, that's a 2 minute summary. Oh well.